This one, so Daniel, corrected selector in media library picker, JavaScript, so JavaScript fix. Media library picker, corrected expected form value for Blog.Publish action.
It's weird. You would have thought that that would have been a bug for a very long time.
It's on the dev branch. But I also changed some things in the spec flow test, so maybe that's weird. I will check the spec flow test. We should have spec flow test for that already. Okay, save, same thing for this one. Oh no, this one doesn't have spec flow test. Okay. Corrected expected form value for the same thing, same issue here.
Okay, right, you just reverted.
That's weird. I would have changed the form instead. When I do that, I don't see the diff. Oh, yeah, they are here. So edit layer, save post. Interesting. Or maybe, yeah, that's weird. I will have the view, not the code. And this one from Lambic. Removing leftover style sheet, inclusion from dynamic forms admin submission list. Okay. To do, should then this be style require. And well, apparently it was not there, so we removed it. Okay, that's the changes. Let me see who's there. Why can't I? Orchard 2. Remote publishing for this we talked about last week, I assume. So support for media in the Open Live Writer. This is what branch? This has been merged. Oh, let me do something. Oops, still here. Oh no! Yeah. Okay, it doesn't mean merge because I haven't created a PR. So this is this branch. So there is a user, Rustem. He joined us last week. He's not here. He's here, Rustem. So he joined us and asked to have the users module to be more abstracted so that we can change the storage for users and not use YesSql. And so he Skyped me and we did a pair programming session and we fixed it in a couple of hours. So this branch contains an abstraction of the user module. So I added some abstractions projects. So this module, the users module, can now be extended to use another store for the user. Doesn't have to be YesSql, and it can be any other class. So we just rely on the iUser interface, which has nothing inside. It's just a marker, so you can resolve the user manager from the interface itself. So you don't have to care about the implementation. And to get the properties of a user, you use the user manager, which has the get name, get email, get phone, get whatever. Yep, so we made some changes and he's using it, right?
Right, yes.
Next step is to do the same changes, which are kind of very simple to do, to the whole class. And that should be okay. this one, Antoine, change CMS and blog recipe. Yeah, so now when you set up the CMS or the blog, the show homepage checkbox will be displayed for blog and page. People were complaining a lot, like, how do I change the homepage? Yes, you have to go into the options for the auto route part, and that was not obvious, so now it's by default. This is a big change, and I will explain later. Jean-Thierry was updating his branches with the breaking changes we do on the master. And Liquid, same thing, I merge master to get up to date. Then this branch QueryStep, I added, well, this is not merged yet. I added some recipe step for creating queries and a recipe step for creating Lucene indices. Some documentation on the modules. I will show updating the branch again, Nick working on Google Cloud stuff still. Fixing indexing tasks, SQL queries. Yes, this one was for SQLite, I assume. Yeah, because the indexing task is not using YesSql, it's using a raw SQL table with pure columns and records, the objects. But the code here was written using SQL directly, but not compatible SQL with other databases than SQL Server. You see this thing, for instance, this is SQL Server. This is not what MySQL or PostgreSQL support. So I changed it to use the dialects now, and made it work with SQLite, for instance. So it's using a SQLite dialect. Recipe steps, Lucene indices, a big refactoring on Lucene indices to remove some services which are not necessary and to make it faster and better. Documentation also. New feature, Lucene Worker. The Lucene Worker is the background task which will index the content items. Oh yeah, this is an important change. So now whenever a content item is created or updated, the Lucene indices will be synchronously updated too, okay, using the content item event handler. So it's not stale result. Once the transaction is committed, then you have the data in the Lucene index. So we don't need the background task to update the Lucene index. So now it's a feature. We don't need it, but we still need it if we use a farm with multiple instances and different file systems. So then in this case, you will enable this feature. But in the standard case, we don't need a background task, which makes things better, faster, less CPU. Everything is better. That's it. This is a PR from Nick. This is a PR from myself, and this is a PR from Antoine, which I assume is creating more editors for the enumeration field, which is good. And it's still missing custom settings for editors, but we are close. Well, yeah. Demo questions. So this one, I might show the code. First big, what took me the most time last week was YesSql. This one, upgrading YesSql. Lots of changes. So I did a huge refactoring on YesSql, meaning I broke everything. So if you are using YesSql like Orchard.Core, then you're broken. But it's better. First change is that the API has changed. So now instead of doing session.query async, you do query, because this thing doesn't return a task. It's not async. It's just returning a query object. What is async is the final call, the first or default or the list. So now I change the name to async at this level. This is what Entity Framework is doing, so I'm doing the same thing. So this changed the API a lot in this case. So this is going everywhere.
BigQuery do the same thing as well. Google BigQuery.
Okay, that's good. I see skip is not async, it's the least async. So it's just an API name change. And that's all we can see from here. Also, yes, I added a bunch of ID properties in the object, at first to fix a bug I found, which in Orchard, probably because of YesSql changes, but I could remove them, but I kept them. So the ID is the database identifier of the object, and they were missing in some of the classes, actually on purpose. I just didn't remember that, but now I remember why, once I understood what was happening. So the ID is assigned when you call .save. Okay, not when it's saved, but when you call .save, it's assigned an ID to say, oh, you are tracked, you are about to be saved. And you can then get the object by its ID. Okay, otherwise you don't know what the ID of the object is, and that's okay. That's okay when these objects are singletons. For instance, data migration record is an object which contains all the data migrations. Okay, and there will be only a single one object like of this type in the database, because the service will just give me the first or default data migration record and save the only data migration record. And this is why we didn't need an ID, because we didn't care about the ID. There is only one. We just say, give me all the data migration record. There is only one. And if there is done, create one. But at some point I added, so that's how it works. And a bunch of classes like this, I added IDs, but actually they're not necessary. They don't hurt, but they're not necessary. And the bug was that I could find multiple entries of this record. So I was like, oh, I'm missing an ID. So when I save the object, it thinks it's a new one because it doesn't find any ID, and it creates a new record. But it was actually a bug in YesSql. So it has been fixed in the meantime, and I kept the IDs. Summary, if you have a single instance of the type in your database, you don't need an ID. Otherwise, you need an ID. If you're not sure, put an ID. That's one of the changes. And I think that's it for the API. You see another example here. That's it for the API. So big change, however, is that I removed the notion of storage, which means there is no more double query, but we can still cache and store the documents in separate storages. It's just the pattern is different. Now we need to implement a custom session and store instead of implementing a document storage. The goal is to make things faster for the standard case, which means that now if I look at the database, there are less queries and less joins. Let me show you. Okay, I know the issue. I'm not on the correct machine, I'm sure, because I don't see Visual Studio here, which means this is not this one either. But if I do that and I type SQL, my taskbar doesn't reflect the computer it's on, so I'm clicking on the wrong icons. Yeah, this is much better. Databases, Orchard, tables. Last one. And if I look out the latest prefix here, 41, the document table now contains the type of the document and its content. Before, this table was separate. Now it's in a single table. This way we don't have to issue another query to the content table to load the object when we need the object. Okay, so that's the first big change. So the less queries, which means better. And the biggest improvement I did was for link queries. I won't go into the details, but now we don't have to compile the link queries. They are interpreted. And this way there is much less CPU to compute, and it's faster. So in the end, after the update, the result is that on Orchard.Core, I could get but with the blog post page and the widget and the footer and the menu, I could get 2,400 requests per second, and after the change on YesSql, I could get 3,200 requests per second. So 1,000 requests per second more. It's like more than 30% improvement in terms of request. So that was a good change. Liked it, and also less connections are created and open, so that everything is much faster and it takes less memory. So that's good for performance. Then yeah, that's it. I think. I don't think there is a demo to do. Oh, I have a topic. I will look at the topic. I didn't change. Yeah, what did I change on the? Yeah, let me show you that. If I look at the setup in the recipe, so the change I did is that now there is Lucene index recipe step, so it will create a search index by default. And I also created the query step, so you can create queries. In this case, we only support the Lucene queries right now, so Lucene queries, the name, the index, this is specific to Lucene query, template, and return content items. So we have a query automatically, which means when we do the setup, if you go to admin, I didn't create a widget which was using it because the theme doesn't comply with widget, but if we look at design site, we have an index and it's automatically populated with all the content items. And if I go to content queries, I can see the recent blog post which was created by the recipe, and you can execute that. Okay, you see last 3 blog posts and I get one, because there is only one. So that's the only change, mainly. Yeah, how it's like if I query the search index here, you can see I have 5 results, and if I do new page, I will create a new tab, new page, foo, and I publish. And right now I do query, I have 6 results. So there is no more stale result. You don't have to wait 30 seconds or 1 minute to get the results. They are there in the search index automatically. That's good. So that's the only changes. Questions?
No, that's good, man.
Topics?
The Lucene stuff, we've exposed an API for that, right? For just querying.
Yes, we can query Lucene directly with the Lucene query, or you can query the query module. You can request a query module by passing the name of the query, like slash recent
from Postman, right?
Yes. And there is a permission. So by default, you need the run Lucene queries and run queries permission, which you don't have on Anonymous. But if you want to allow any client to do that, you just remove the permission or add it to the Anonymous, or you use OpenID and you create a client application with the correct role to let your application access these APIs. If you need the demo, ask Sergio.
Okay.
Because he told me
that's cool.
You can do that.
And we just need a way to create content, and then we got the querying and the create. Can we create a Lucene index through the API at the moment?
No.
No, okay.
So there is, right now we don't have any API to create anything. It's just reading.
Okay.
You can read content items by IDs. You can do Lucene queries. You can do name queries, but there is nothing to create content. Theory, it should be very simple, at least to create a content item. At least
totally.
Because we just pass the JSON, and the JSON, like we do for the preview, you send the JSON and it will create the content item and import it. That should be super easy. We don't have it. Again, we need permissions for that, granular permissions for the APIs. Or I assume if we use the existing permission, that works also. either if you're an API or not. If you can do it from the UI, why could not you do it from the API? So I think we can do the same
Well, I
thing.
guess the API, we need to think of something like a authorization key or something like that, rather than
No. We have it. It's called OpenID.
Yeah, but you can't sign. Can you
Yes,
do
we have
OpenID
it.
from API?
OpenID Connect. It's there, and we have it. Everything for your API is supported. This is the best you can have for an API. So in the OpenID module, you create an application with a client ID and a client secret. And then from your client, you go with the OAuth2 flow to get the token, and then you get a JOT token that you can use to call all your APIs. So that's the best thing you can have for an API.
Okay.
And it's there. This is OpenID module. Sergio, I'm right? Because we even talked about it this weekend.
So can we do that via the API, or have we got APIs for that already?
For what? For getting tokens and everything?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the OpenID module. And it will use the permissions that you have with your client application, because you set a role to your client application.
Okay, cool. So if I've got a user and I've got Postman open,
yep,
I can make calls using Postman and get my token.
Yep, and by default, Postman will reuse your cookies, so it should work also.
Okay, cool.
If you are authenticated. So you can do a SPA application right now that will get the content from Orchard, any content.
Yeah. Okay, so we just need to extend that to do
post by
to CRUD.
Yeah. Why do you need to create content from the APIs? Do you have a scenario in mind?
I have a requirement where they don't want UI.
Okay. Interesting. Use Elasticsearch.
Well, yeah. So, well, why do we need that? We have a CMS, or we have a very powerful CMS already.
Yeah, but if you don't use any of the features, then I'm like, if you just want to create content items from an API and do Lucene Queries, use Elasticsearch. They don't want a UI to create their custom content items. And
yeah, but our modules, we use YesSql for other things, right? So.
Okay.
Therefore, we need the content in there.
But maybe then you just need your own APIs to store the objects, and not Elasticsearch, and not Orchard CMS. I don't know. That's weird. If you don't care about theming, if you don't care about the content, the environment, there is not much you will get from Orchard. There might be modules, and then okay, there's some modules that you are using and you need them. Okay, or the fact that it's it has the history and versions. Okay, but yeah, careful.
I don't know, man. Like, it was one of the reasons why I needed the workflow module. So.
Oh yeah. So for instance, yes, if you then there are many services that Orchard can provide that, yeah, you could reuse, and then I would agree, use Orchard, because for instance there are workflow module or things like taxonomies, but again, yeah, if you don't use the UI,
it's cool to be able to define a workflow and just post it to an API. Yeah. And
then you could still do that. I agree. Yeah, even if you don't use the UI, if you have the workflow module.
Exactly.
Okay. Custom. Yep. Okay. That two topics. They are the same actually, but related. Two topics. About queries. Three. Let me add 3 topics. So I will talk about SQL. SQL. Or what? SQL, ODATA, and the last one was static. Okay. SQL, because I was almost done with the queries and Lucene and everything, and
OData. I thought that had died.
I'm talking about SQL first. One. SQL, but that's okay. So I was looking at how we could expose the SQL database for the queries, because we have Lucene Queries, but you can do what you can do with the index, and maybe you don't want the Lucene index, I don't know, for performance reasons, or you want the raw SQL access to do better queries, or to query stuff that is not in the Lucene index right now. For instance, users are not in Lucene indices. Cool, but they are not. We don't have a way to, well, we didn't implement that, so you might want to get data from other things than the Lucene indices. So I was wondering about how to integrate SQL, and so we have queries like this, okay, for a Lucene query. The issue with SQL is that we need to parse it. So if someone types select star from users, let's say I want to create the users, okay, where something foo equals where username equals foo. Okay, so the issues with SQL, just to explain what are the challenges here, is that if we expose raw SQL like this, first issue is it has to work with all RDBMS. Okay, so it has to work with SQL Server, SQLite, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and in SQL Server you need to do that, and in MySQL you need to do that, and you need to do that in PostgreSQL, and it's case sensitive. So there are many things, okay, many different things. So we can't just have raw SQL like this. Also, the in operator is different in Postgre than in the others. Also, the offset is different in all of the databases, okay, like limit, offset, and things like that. So this is the first issue, has to work with all the BMS. Then, security. We need to prevent anyone from accessing tables they can't access. For instance, we have a prefix one.user, which is for, let's say, tenant1.users, and there is tenant2.users maybe in the same database. So if you can type anything for any table, then you might be able, with your query from your tenant in a multi-tenant environment, to query data from others. And this is bad. Okay, we want to prevent that. So security, there is tenant isolation. And there is also a SQL injection. So we need to prevent that. Even if we do from that, they can type anything in the values and, oh, let me close that, or take a parameter here that I will pass that will actually close the query, you know, the SQL injection, and do the whatever, blah, blah, and do the new SQL select on another table. So we need to prevent that. So the only way to do that is to actually parse the SQL here, validate the entries, and parse it in a way that we can generate it for any database. So use something like HQL, a parser like HQL, which will be abstracted from the database, and where we could, when we generate the SQL, re-render the table names and so on. So we need a parser. So solution parser. Okay, HQL or anything like this. And so I'm looking at all the solutions. The issue is that we can't reuse the HQL parser because it's based on an Hibernate model, and it's using the Hibernate model, so you can't use table names here. It has to be objects that you know, like let's say metadata that you need to format like this way, and it's for objects, so it's not really what we want. I found a T-SQL parser in .NET Core, but the issue is that it's really T-SQL, so it supports everything in a T-SQL and just for transact SQL. So it's not very adapted to be able to render anything else than that. It's more like for analyzing a T-SQL query, so I'm kind of stuck. I found some JavaScript things where you can create a SQL query using JavaScript, like select star dot where, and then you can say and, I don't know, foo, or equals, that equals foo bar something like this. The issue is that it's not really obvious, and it's JavaScript, so we have to run it on the server side every time. Might be slower, but that's a solution. And I'm looking right now at JSON. So I made some examples just to see how it will look like in JSON, because I found some articles about expressing it in JSON. So it's really like the Lucene Queries we have, kind of the same ID, but to represent a SQL query. The nice thing is that we don't need to create a parser. It's JSON, so it's parsed very easily. It's just analyzing the tree, which we'll still have to do if we had to parse the SQL. We will still have to interpret the AST. So it will look something like this. So for a simple query, from property, content item index, select document ID, where, and if you pass an object like this, it's the end, published equals true, and content type blog post. So it's similar to SQL. It's very simple to read, like you will read SQL. From, select, where, you will have order by, limits. The from, so some examples we can have the where you can just pass a property like this with a value for an equal, or if you want a custom operator, you pass an object with the operator and the value, like the Lucene query in Elasticsearch. You can have, so that, yeah, this can be one way to represent that. This can be another way, but I prefer the property one. You can have ends like this using the same format. So I think that's readable enough. You can also use aliases or table names. So if you use the field name, it will be like the field name in SQL, or you can use foo dot the table dot the field name in the column name. You can create, let's say, so from where join this table on this constraint, like a where constraint. You could do aliases by using the colon, so from table name and as something, and then you can reference using either the table name or the alias. So the field is referenced the alias dot the field name. You could do joins defining also aliases. That's an example. We could use all these operators. We could do complex selects even for subqueries. So that would be pretty easy to implement actually, because there is no parsing. It's just about navigating the tree, which is easy. So I'm looking at seeing if it's doable, if it's valuable, if that would work. I don't know, maybe too much work, or what do you think? What did I miss? I hate it.
Not sure I like it.
Okay.
I feel like
so
it's another query language that we've got in.
Yes. Yes. So we could. It's doable. So if you say you prefer to type something like this.
No, I didn't say that. I just.
And that. I mean, it's the same job in the end, because we need an AST to be able to render agnostic SQL and to ensure security. So we need an AST, and the more the closer to SQL the AST is, the easier it is to render SQL. And even for you to type SQL, because the goal is really to type SQL. I want to be able to type the most free SQL that you can, like no constraint, like Gerald says, unions, subqueries, and things like this.
How's this going to stop SQL injection?
That's what I'm saying, because we parse it, so we know that every value, we don't take the value as is, we escape, we SQL escape it. Like you will do with HQL, or we use params. We could also do at age, and we will replace by the list of parameters that you send with the query.
How can I prevent it from doing cross-tenant joins and stuff like that?
Because we parse it, so when we know that it's a table name, then we will inject the prefix for you. You will never type the prefix. We will inject the prefix for you and escape the table name. That's why we need, again, that's why we need a parser, and that's why we need an intermediate representation of the query. But then what language do we parse? Do we parse some SQL 92 SQL, or do we parse a JSON document, or do we parse an HSQL query, or looks like SQL, or anything else? Like JavaScript, we could parse JavaScript. That's the same thing. We just need to build an AST.
It looks like having something as close as possible to T-SQL would be the most natural to people. Yep. I think HQR was a little too alien because it actually puts a little too objective stuff in there. But yeah, the interesting part here is that you do the sanitization on the abstract syntax tree step, which can be a JSON representation or whatever, but that's where you sanitize.
Yep. So I personally prefer to type SQL than this JSON. Okay, it's more obvious because if you know SQL and to write that, you need to know SQL. Okay.
Yeah, you do, and I don't think anybody wants to write JSON here.
I agree.
All those quotes and the operators are in quotes. I mean that. Bleh.
Yeah, I understand. So for Lucene Query, there is no choice because, well, we could create another language like SQL for Lucene Queries, but later, okay? We're not in, this is not our job. Why I went with JSON is because I didn't need to write a parser for SQL.
So where are we going to be using
it can be your first step. I mean, we can begin with that and have the parser later.
That will build the same tree like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you want to use this again?
Oh, in queries.
In the queries module, okay.
I've always said, maybe you missed the meetings where I mentioned that the queries module supports any kind of queries, as simple or as complex as you want. The first implementation I did was the Lucene one. Okay.
Queries module. Okay, that's fine. Right.
Because when you say, let me show you, maybe you missed this one. Let me show you that. If I go to, where is my browser?
I've caught up from all the other. I watched them online.
You see queries. When I go to the it stopped. When I go to the queries page, I can say add query, and then I have all the list of query sources. Lucene is one.
Yeah, but I've seen that.
But SQL will be one also because we need to be able to query the SQL database we have.
Yeah,
for performance and also flexibility. So then, how do we? Oh, and we could also have very simple. DSLs like content type, blog post, like something that will simplify typing queries for special cases. You could have a user's query source that will provide a language or UI just with checkboxes and dropdowns to select users as a query, or like Sergio will do. A nice UI to do like the query module in Orchard.One, where you will select all the sources and add filters and groups, all by checkboxes and drop-downs and drag and drop and things like this, not typing anything. So that we already have this abstraction, which is very good, I assume, because then we can create all the queries you want. But to query SQL, we need SQL. And this is the best way, the most flexible way you can have. And everyone will understand that. Every dev who needs that will know how to type a query, and you can test it on your database, and then okay, now I need to write it in the query editor. So yeah, I'm not opposed at all to even start with the full SQL like this, because I think this is the ultimate choice. We can have it. It's simpler. It's more. The time to release is shorter because it's easier to. I don't have to write a SQL parser because there are many cases in SQL like subqueries and everything that this is not an easy task.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I like the idea. Okay, cool.
Because
then I'm for SQL.
You have two options. Yeah, either we have that and we ship it soon, or we say no. We will have to do the full SQL, which I agree with, and let's wait. Let's not spend the time on that because we can have it later. That's okay. We have Lucene Queries right now. So I don't know.
Should we pop it into a GitHub issue? I prefer the SQL to creating some arbitrary JSON.
Okay. It's not about just checking. We need to parse because we need to render per DB engine. So it's not just about detecting SQL injection and things. It's not like a validation of SQL. It's not SQL validation. It has to be an actual parsing. Okay. Other topic. ODATA. Who said ODATA was dead? ODATA is a specification. You can't kill a specification. So I was thinking maybe we should have an ODATA query.
It's not that it's dead, it's that the rest of the industry has moved on.
To what? And let's talk about it, because I thought the same thing until yesterday.
I looked at this about a week ago as well. So
that has been ported to .NET-Core.
Yeah, I know. I saw it.
The parser and everything.
Yep. It's called Restia or something like that. I just pasted it in.
Well, Restia is one thing. It's helping to build OData queries, but there is an OData parser. You are a parser and EDM model and everything to generate OData results and evaluate OData queries. This is different. Yeah. So Restia is a client. Restia client. Or making OData queries with an object model. And to send queries and to interpret results and everything. But there is the Microsoft.OData.core package, which is for .NET Core also. And supports parsing OData queries and executing them. So it's not dead per se. So why OData? But wait. Still in the same topic as queries. We could expose the OData language to query content items because there is a notion of filter. You can order by, top, skip, and everything. That's a language to query. Okay, the language there is the URL or URI language, which means it's better for APIs because it's a format that is adapted for the query string. Okay, so foo.com/ and then filter equals bar equals something like that. Okay. So that's something. So yeah, actually, so what I thought about it is that because in SQL all the tables are just maps, there are no relationships between tables. You can filter on two tables at the same time if you want. It's like a join, but it's not a navigating an object model. So it will be actually easy to represent any filter on content types, content items, and all their indexes in the SQL database using OData. So I'm just mentioning it, and we could still have an endpoint accepting OData to convert to SQL to get all the content items. At least the content items, maybe also some other tables, but it should be very, very simple to do so. So just mentioning that. And I also found a CMS, actually. What's its name? Let me mention that if you want to. Maybe that's what you want, Nick. You need to use this CMS, Squidex.
Oh, right. I should use a different CMS.
Yes, I mean, use a tool.
Headless CMS. This is what I was talking about, a headless CMS.
Yes. Well, we talked about the headless CMS many times for Orchard.
Yeah.
Orchard is a decoupled CMS. You can use it with a UI or without. It's your choice. So it's headless CMS. You create content items. It's based on Mongo, so everything is Mongo. And what they do is there is the endpoint to get the content item. The content items are an OData link. That's it. They are using OData, and then they convert the OData query into a MongoDB query, like we could do converting the OData to a SQL query. But yeah, see, it's .NET Core. ASP.NET Core. It works on all platforms. Headless CMS. It also have a hosted solution, and that's it. That's good. They're using ODATA as their main language for querying because it's headless. No, again, GraphQL, you can't do what you can with ODATA. You can't, for instance, in GraphQL express a Boolean operation like field 1 equals 2 and field 2 equals 3. You can't do that. You can pass parameters, but you can't have dynamic representations of filters. It's more for messaging the server-side queries. Like if we had Lucene and SQL, you could say with GraphQL to execute the query from Lucene, the query from SQL, and then just extract 1 or 2 properties from them, and that's it. You don't express the filters or the queries with GraphQL language. That's the idea. So yeah, just putting that on the table. If people want, like Nick, you want more APIs to query stuff, and maybe that's also a solution in the UI. That's, you can read it. It's easier to build than building a Lucene query or SQL query to get the data. Maybe.
I like the idea of ODATA. Bertrand, what did you mean by the industry has moved on from ODATA? Is it just that no one could implement it, or?
It's that it seems like it's not on the radar of anyone who isn't in the direct Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah, I felt the same thing. I don't think anyone even knew what it was.
Yeah, it's very, very Microsoft specific.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I guess.
Well, this is like public API, right? It's it's as if you were saying, yeah, we are implement our APIs using I don't know, some Microsoft protocol derived from WS something.
Ooh.
You wouldn't do that today, right?
No. So ODATA, it's not
API. It's great if we can, adhere more to current practices from the industry than to, some spec that happens to be superior but is only used by Microsoft. If it was an internal thing, I wouldn't mind so much. But
you can still use REST custom.
What does it look like? What does the RESTful URLs look like in contrast to what you would consume from an API that's done for ODATA, or is it just about exposing metadata?
What do you mean? What was your question? Your question is about ODATA. What does it look like?
Yeah. Well, So if I did a REST API, something like /users/1, and I did a get on that. What would it look like from a?
If you have like /users, and then what would you like to get from users? You could say.
So if I had an ID in there, for example, and that was a GET request,
you could say ID equals 12. Okay, that will work. Or
no, /12. Yeah.
Okay.
So what would that look like from?
If you want. Well, the issue is not about what would it look like, is what it allows you to express. Example, I will go on. Now you want 2 of them. You will do 12, 13, okay? Yeah. But now let's say you want a name / foo.
Yeah? So that's what it exposes.
So now let's say you want name, foo, and validated or whatever. How do you express that in REST URL? You do, okay, or now let's do that, validated equals true. But I just want the first 10. Oh crap, okay. /page /page 10, okay? But the issue is that when you want to mix all these things, like expressions, like how can you express a dynamic expression like validated equals true and something else based on a relationship or some. This is harder to express in REST endpoints. This was why. No, not even that. So it's hard to define dynamic filters, and ODATA fixes that because there is a language for that. It could be ugly, like all true. You can do things like this. Okay, it's in the query string. You pass something like this. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but it's something like this. So that's the idea of ODATA. And I assume it answers the question. And then you can have different entity types because there is only a single point, the /ODATA, and you can query any entity type with any filter on its properties and its relationship and page and sort and everything in a single endpoint. That's the idea. So people don't like it, so they go to REST-like endpoints, and then because you need to do maybe multiple queries to get the results you want when you have REST endpoints like this, then you go to GraphQL because then you send a GraphQL query, which on the server side will actually wrap all these local queries and wrap all the content and send you one set of results with a single request.
Well, so the problem with REST, I tend to find is that you end up with a very chatty API, unless you start creating intermediate services.
Yeah, but GraphQL solves that. That's the main idea of GraphQL. You send all you want in GraphQL, and then the interpreter of the GraphQL query on the server side will do the local calls and message your data and send you the result.
Yeah, that's what Netflix does as well. But isn't that what OData does? OData does something very similar to GraphQL, where it sends across the query, right?
But with the OData specification, you can express your queries dynamically. With GraphQL, you can express what you need. You can't do filters.
The one thing I do like about the OData stuff is that am I right in believing that you can use the client to hook it right up to an iQueryable object or something like that, and it's all discoverable? Wasn't that the whole point of OData? Was everything was really discoverable?
You have that with GraphQL too.
Okay.
Because GraphQL needs the metadata and will expose it to you, and you have clients with IntelliSense and everything. The only difference is, what you can express with an OData query and a GraphQL query. That's a big difference. So I'm not saying we'll do anything, either OData or GraphQL. I just want to talk about it to see what people think and what it opens. And maybe I'm missing something, but or maybe we can express filters like this in GraphQL. I just missed it completely, or it's extensible, so we can do that probably. There we can use a parameter to pass a string representing a filter. I don't know. We'll see. Static. This because I was looking at how we could build static websites from Orchard, like using Orchard as a headless CMS or decoupled CMS with just the admin, and build static sites using the static site generators. So I looked at it, and it's pretty easy actually. We can do that tomorrow. It's super easy. And I looked at how Hugo works. I looked at JSQL. I looked at headless CMSs, so I found Squidex. I looked at Dato CMS, which does that. What I liked with Dato CMS is that they provide some command line tools to work with Hugo. So the idea is that you have a command like Dato, like Orchard or .NET, dump. You pass a token, an API key, okay, and then it creates it grabs all the data from the CMS and formats it locally for Hugo, and then Hugo runs and creates the static site. So I think that's also something we should look at to provide some guidance or examples on how to build static sites from Orchard CMS. So I think that would be good. so.
I thought Louis de Jare was the one working on OData a long time ago or something.
I don't think so at all.
Okay.
Okay, questions, topics, comments?
When are we releasing?
Media.
Okay.
Finishing media now. I hope I can
So
finish.
I agree with Sergio that OData does expose a little too much about the data model. It's something that I never really liked about OData.
Oh, what I didn't like about OData is that if when you have an object model like an entity framework model or an embedded model, you can navigate relationships, and then you can express stuff with OData that you are not even sure you can express in SQL, or that will be super slow in SQL, and that you will not do that, or SQL won't be optimized at all. But the difference with YesSql is that the model is super simple, because we have one table for documents. Let's say we expose just content items. There is no relationship. You can just query on flat data based on the table names. So it's more secure.
Mitigated in our case, but
mitigation is the good word.
Yeah, but still, I tend to prefer to be very deliberate about what's exposed, and OData is not that deliberate.
That's okay.
I'm sure it's more work, but
if we can find, I also talk about it just to see what people know and the solution that are existing. Like, is there a REST format that we could use to express anything? Maybe we should not care about dynamic filters like OData allows, so you can query anything you want dynamically from the client. Maybe we need we can invent something else. Maybe what we have with Lucene Queries, SQL queries from the API endpoint is already sufficient. After all, you can send a SQL queries now. Well, when we have SQL support in queries, you can send a SQL query from the client. Nothing prevents you from doing that. Or Lucene query, you can already do that. So maybe we don't need that at all. Or maybe when we will have a custom DSL, a nice DSL for content types, content items, then we can use this one. I don't know.
We could try maybe implementing something like RAML.
What is RAML?
Yeah. It's
RESTful
interesting.
API modeling.
It's a spec. Came up in my course today.
Not sure it's related. It
Well,
looks more like
it's about querying APIs.
so it's more like GraphQL, right?
Yeah.
So if there was a querying standard we will implement is GraphQL, but the issue is that it doesn't do well. Maybe it's complementary to what we are doing with the queries. So from the GraphQL query, we can query other REST endpoints and queries and massage the data, because this is something we don't have and people will want. Like when we call an API, Lucene API or SQL API, maybe we want to manipulate the data before sending it to the client, or just extracting some properties because we want that. So maybe we need GraphQL in with what we have today. Let's look, if you have time, guys, you can read about it and find ideas. Yeah, I like to be able to provide that, yes, for applications, static sites, and things like this. We need that. But again, we can already do that because we have the API query. So it's just a better way to exposing it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, done. Good. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Cheers.
See you next time. Bye.